Hello everyone, thanks again for tuning in. Today we will continue our study in the book of Galatians. So if you turn to chapter 4 of Galatians, we'll look at the first verse. We left off by indicating the importance of working with the Spirit that is in us, the Spirit of Christ. And the way we work with the Spirit that is in us is by operating according to faith. Now, Paul makes a statement in Galatians chapter 4 verse 1 is very powerful. So let's read that. Galatians chapter 4 verse 1. It says, "Now I say that an heir, as long as he be a child, differs no difference from a servant, though he be Lord of all." He says that a child and a servant are basically the same, even though the child is heir to the throne or heir to everything. Now he's using this example as those who want to still operate according to the law of works. If you can't discern that you can't keep the law, then it shows your immaturity as a child. But if you can see that God has did away with the law and that you're not a servant as one who was told to keep the law, but now you've been called to be sons through faith, because the Son of God lives in you. The Son of God helps us to be able to operate like sons and not servants under the law. So that means that under the old covenant, the law was for children. Under the new covenant, grace is for sons. And this is why Paul says for as many that wants to be circumcised and keep the law, they must remember they must keep the whole law, because in order to be righteous or in order to be pleasing to God, they must keep the whole law. But in their trying to be circumcised and keep the law, they fall from grace. That statement there says that grace has to be higher than the law. And it also indicates that the law is for children and that grace is for sons. So when Paul says that if you try to keep the law, then you fall. You fall from grace. Grace is higher than the law. And we don't want that. We don't want to try to please God by our own efforts. The way to please God is by the expression of our faith in the Son of God and by the working of the Holy Spirit in us from the inside out. We also can see that faith is our way of saying to God, I believe you and I appreciate what you have done. That's pretty much the way I like to see it. When I believe a promise in the scriptures, it is me saying to God, not only I believe it, but I appreciate it. And I want to apprehend this promise. I want to cash in on this promise. Well, God says the only way you can cash in on this promise is by faith. Is by faith. So let us not be one who operate according to the law, because we're in debt to the whole law, because God looks at things as a whole, as a composite whole. If you break one, you broke them all. And that's why in the Old Testament, all it took is one person, the priest, to represent all of Israel. Because when the priests will fall short of his standing before God, not only did the priests suffer, but all of Israel suffered. Why? Because God looks at everything as a whole. One person can represent the whole. One breaking of the law represents the whole. And no one could keep the whole commandments. So let us not operate as a child, but let us grow into our sonship according to the hearing of faith. So now I wanted to talk a little bit about chapter 5, which deals with the flesh. Now, we've already covered 4 chapters. Chapter 1 reveals the Son in us. Chapter 2 reveals the life in us, the more powerful life in us, and how we ought to seek out and live out this life in us. Chapter 3 and 4, we realize in order to live out this life of Christ in us, we will have to do it by the faith of the Son of God. We will have to do it by operating according to the hearing of faith. Because the moment you and I want to live out this life, this new life in us, we're going to come up against an obstacle, and that is the flesh. I find that pretty interesting. Paul saves the portion concerning the flesh towards the last 2 chapters. Now, chapter 5 reveals to us that for as many of them that are in Christ, they have crucified the flesh with its passions and lusts. This is what it tells us in the book of Galatians. For as many of them that are in Christ, they have crucified the flesh with its passions and lusts. Now, how can that be? The reason you and I now have the power to crucify the flesh is because of Christ crucifying the old man. You see, once Christ did what he did on the cross, once we see and receive what he did on the cross, then now we can execute the judgment that is on the flesh. If Christ wouldn't have crucified us on the cross, or if Christ wasn't crucified on the cross, then you and I would never have the power to crucify the flesh. Now, I made a statement, I believe in tape 1, where I said that this crucifying is continuous. It is continuous. And it is something that has been very enlightening to me. And I just wanted to share that with you, that it is God's will that the judgment that took place on the cross of Christ, these things will be a reality to us. Join me again as I do a study continually in Galatians. Thank you and God bless.